Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I've been sitting here today reflecting on fatherhood quite a bit. Hello to my first visitor. Thank you for joining me for this reflective, I almost said Periscope broadcast. I shout out to my bro Izzy. I was in his scope the other night. It was three of us. Um, was it Black Life Reflections? The other person. Um, but my point for that is that Izzy brought up something that I'm very passionate about, which is learning and teaching. I've been a substitute teacher. I taught at the college level as an instructor at Rocky College for the PA program. I've been a teacher for 20 years, if you count the fact that I've had to off and on teach residents, nurses, residents or doctors in training. That's just part of your duties as a doctor. It's not even, it's funny because in medicine, it's not even discussed with you if you will fulfill the role of teacher. It's just understood. It's just part of the job. It is the very name doctere in Latin means to teach. So it would be kind of like asking a fisherman, "Do you want to catch fish today?" To ask a doctor, "Does he want to teach?" When you sit down with a patient, you're a teacher. That's your job. It's a teacher who has technical skills, surgeries, hundreds and hundreds of surgeries that doctors perform. Maybe it's thousands of surgeries. I don't know. So it's a subject I've definitely had some experience with. If I recall the discussion, it wasn't about fathers as teachers. I mean, obviously, our father is one of our first teachers. That should be obvious to anyone who's a human being. Even animals know this because even though the mother appears to be very, very involved in the upbringing of animals, lions, mammals specifically, furry animals we call mammals, the father has a role. I didn't realize that male lions will let younger lions into the pride at some point. If he's getting older, maybe it's to let the young lion take over the pride. Um, there's definitely some deeper things going on in the animal kingdom, which, I mean, if you want to include plants, you need to, because when I studied zoology, we studied plants as well, not by themselves, but as part of the kingdom of living organisms who have a species. That's funny. I said species. Who have a species name, you know, kingdom origin, kingdom phylum, class, origin, genus, and species. KP KPCOGS. Something I learned from zoology. That's how we classify living organisms. KPCOGS. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, and species. Plants have all of those. They have kingdom, phylum, order, kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, and species. So they're part of our continuum of living organisms, I will say. And the first plants were actually mobile, like bacteria, but they contain chlorophyll. So technically, they were a hybrid of animal, like bacteria, and plant. So life has gone through a transition where it was plant-like and animal-like, right? If you study zoology. But on Izzy Scope, they talked about the the book Bell Curve and how it's. I haven't read that book, but I'm aware of it, and I'm aware that it says that maybe African Americans specifically, I'm not sure, but it must have referenced some group as having on average lower IQs. And but and then at that point, I remember Izzy saying that it's recognized, and I 100% agree with him. Even though I came to these insights of my own on my own, it's recognized that there are multiple different learning styles. And because we don't readily admit this in our educational system, and because we act like there aren't multiple learning styles, we basically take squares and triangles and trapezoids and octagons and slam them into square holes. And we beat them with mallets that look like punishment, isolation, social isolation, etc., etc. Um, Eventually, lack of monetary resources if you don't learn to become a square. Me myself, I tend to be more of a right brain learner because I deal with concepts first, and I deal with tiny details and equations and later. And that's just a style that was developed in myself because of my own recognition of my own abilities and how I saw the world. The patterns that I saw in the world seemed to me to be better organized and recalled, which is what this is about. Science is about reproducibility, right? So I was able to reproduce from my own memory these patterns and facts if I learned, if I was able to organize them in a sort of a gestalt pattern. Gestalt, right? Like if you look at this cursory wise, oh look, a picture. But look very closely at this lady. She has one leg. This implies a skirt, but it's a blue splotch. This is a white rectangle with two tan arms, and there's a oval, or a, what is this shape? Triangular ovoid orange splotch that implies blonde hair. But your brain immediately fills in that's a blonde white woman walking down Bourbon Street, coming from the risque section back up towards Redfish Grill. Razoo's would be back here where I used to party all the time, right? All that is implied. Now, my own addition to that picture is because of my own experiences in New Orleans and living there and going to Razoo's and many a night getting drunk there before I had to go back to work the next week and dancing the night away in the beautiful gardens of Razoo's with the fountains and all the beautiful people that I came across there. And some beautiful people went with me there. Sometimes I would go there and hang out. Some of the nurses from work would go hang out there with us. um, so you can already see just based on that example that observations and learning styles are extremely complex. Extremely complex. And I don't know the official number of learning styles, but to divide them into left and right brains is just me pulling from modern psychology's recognition of the cognitive processes that they're both involved with, and it gets extremely detailed. But there's a funny experiment that happened a while back. They took rats and they put them into mazes and taught them the mazes. If I recall correctly, you will need to look up these experiments on your own. But I recall that the latter generations of rats were able to navigate the maze easier if their parents had been taught the maze. That one I'm not as sure about, but I think I recall that one. What I am sure about is the fact that when the experimenters started cutting out parts of the rat's brain, they couldn't cut out the memories of the maze, how to navigate the maze. When I first heard this, it was a very amazing bit of information for me because I had long ago suspected, as a young clinician, after I got over the brainwashing that my culture had, my country, my culture, my sex, my language, English, had imparted to me, the ignorance I call it, and the fact that they couldn't cut out the memories of the maze is just one more in the series of experiments that I'm aware of, whereby cognitive scientists have learned that they're not exactly sure how the brain stores memories, in what part, what section. What they have noticed is that it's not compartmentalized in a nice, neat little square in the brain that says memories of stuff and things that have happened and learning that we have from school, our school days. That's not how it works. So, when you learn of this type of information and people tell you stuff like this, two things are going to happen amongst many other possibilities. One is that this reinforces or reinforces a good word, your own suspicions that we don't truly understand how we learn. Not 100%. The second thing it may do, is you may just completely not give a damn and say, you know what, it was good enough for grandpa, and it was good enough for great grandpa and father, and by God, it's good enough for me, and I'll learn that way. What way? Rote memory. Like one guy said, his was it Alan Watts said that his teacher would slap him on the hands when he played the wrong piano note. That way, y'all know the way I'm talking about. A B C D, and actually singing is a nice way to learn because when you sing, music integrates a lot of the left and right brain together, and the cerebellum, amongst other parts. If you sing it in rhythm, that is, with a tempo, which you have to, it's impossible not to, even if you are doing a little bit of what's it called? Oh, it's a word I'm blanking out on. It means to change the rubato, maybe change the tempo up voluntarily, not because you can't play worth a damn. um, yeah, I mean, the way we are taught in schools reinforces the skills in a society that is enamored by technology and things. And Alan Watts said things. Listening to him the other day, kind of listening to him always sparks my brain. You can't listen to Alan Watts if you have a brain at all and not come away with some insights. It's pretty much impossible unless you're in a complete deep coma with no dreaming, no awareness at all, except for the root level of awareness that we call vegetative, which maybe we share with rocks. I don't know, but at any rate, yes, there are different styles of learning. We don't fully understand learning. It is not contained within one portion of the brain. The reductionist model of learning, which is you put these things together and they make a pattern, the brain stores this pattern somewhere in a geometric chemical pattern, which is what chemistry is. It's learning about chemical reactions, entropy, enthalpy, and it's also learning three dimensional, almost like architecture structures. and how these structures have certain qualities that allow them to enter into chemical reactions, either favorably or unfavorably, and what these reactions look like after they take place geometrically, chemically, energetically, thermodynamically, right? All these things. Look at all these different ways you can look at the reality of a thing, which, if you're a thing, you have chemistry, period. Everything has chemistry, okay? That's why it's a fundamental science. If you exist, because you have chemistry, and we can break that down into particle physics, which is chemistry. It's called physics, but it's arbitrary to separate chemistry and physics. The way medicine separates itself into a million different specialties. There's just used to be just general practitioner. He knew everything, and that was good enough. As our society has grown more complex, we have the need to subspecialize and separate these different fields because of our reductionist model. We're slowly learning that there's no end to separating reality into parts. It never ends. So there probably likely is no end to the number of disciplines you could create to study reality. That's just my own insight. Okay. What's my point for all this? My point is that, well, before I get to my point, I'm gonna give you some more examples of what I've learned about learning over the years. I took something a long time ago called the Mega Memory Course. It was a course you could buy on television or the internet. It taught you to remember lists of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 things, concepts, words. If you couldn't remember names very well, it taught you to peg names so you wouldn't forget them. I forgot the guy's name that did it. He made a lot of money off of this course, but he obviously had some insights, and I would love to know his background as far as where he learned about the process of learning, because whatever he knew about the process of learning, every teacher, every college professor, every doctor, every person that needs to learn anything in school would likely benefit from his insights, because not once in my education as a medical doctor did anyone ever discuss learning styles. I never knew anything about learning styles. I just knew that someone slapped that book in front of me and said, learn this. Okay. So the process was more authoritative, and I'm more like a type B personality. I don't really respond to authority very well because I don't need to be authoritatively coaxed. I just do what needs to be done. If I'm a little bit slow or a little bit too fast, I usually figure that out on my own. And if you gently remind me in a way that's equanimous and unjudging, I will of my own accord correct the insights that you bring to me. But alas, I wasn't born in a society that values that type of learning. Because in society that only wants to crank out widgets, they're concerned with uh, learning about widgets, how you classify widgets, separate widgets, what are widgets, what color, what shape, what smell, which boxes do they go in, how fast can you put them in the box, and God help you if you can't put them in the box quickly, because then we have other classifications for you. You know, we call you retarded, ignorant, dumbass, slow in the head, imbecile. I can keep going. Amazing how many words we have, huh, for negative qualities, right? How many words we have for love? That's the only one I know of, even though it's said different ways in English. So, the diaspora that came to this country from Africa, most of us are not aware that our ancestors think differently than the way we think, spoke a language that was different than the language we speak, and we're indoctrinated into a different society than the one we looked at, where yes, we had artisans and technicians, but the way they integrated into tribal culture and into the larger cities later on was different. Most of the trades were passed down through families. A lot of the teaching was oral tradition. It was hands-on. The respect for teacher and student was implied. It was understood that this is what was going to happen, unless you come from a family of people that were crazy or criminals or child abusers. I would suspect that the way a young king would be educated by his I'm using a king right now for a reason, but the way a young king would be expected to be taught by his teachers is understood on pains of death. I mean, if you get the prince or the princess into your chambers, or you go to the classroom and you teach them a certain way, the wrong thing, and you disrespect them, it's probably going to be your head. I'm just saying. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm just saying. Now, back to the Mega Memory course. Is it Justin Trudeau? Is that his name? Can't remember. It's not important per se. What's important is the information I'm giving. Um, but what I learned was that the brain learns by associating what it already knows with what it's trying to learn. In a nutshell. In a nutshell. And the style of teaching that says you already should know all this already, are you stupid? And why can't you learn this thing that you don't already know quickly? Unfortunately, that came from some other part of the world, and it became the dominant style of teaching, where rote and memorization precede any attempt to lay a foundation for learning itself. I mean, before I go out there and try to run 26 miles marathon, I think what we do first is we run shorter amounts of time. We document the times, and we try to see over time, can we run a same comfortable pace but quicker? So the way we learn to do things physically is more than appreciated, because you have no choice. Okay, if you want to go to the Olympics, this is the way we know you will learn to do gymnastics, football, basketball, and even, and I understand there's different ways of teaching that, but my point is that the body itself, okay, the body itself, we've learned in sports medicine, has an optimal way of performing over time and improving that performance if you fulfill certain conditions. I myself, as a former cyclist, mixed martial artist, gymnast, and long distance runner, cross country runner, I didn't run mega distances because of my physical condition wouldn't allow it, but I slowly appreciated that everything that I thought I knew about learning as far as physical learning was completely wrong. For instance, when I was taught that just go long, slow, and then faster paces if you want to run a race, okay, this is what I did when I trained and got my varsity letter in high school and cross country. That is the absolute worst way to run cross country, and the worst possible way to get better at cross country. That's ancient history. And if no one ever tells you, if your coaches aren't studying more modern methods, that's the way you're going to be taught. You just run, run, run until you drop, puke, and then go home and recover, and then you do it again. Many of you know about high intensity hit training, high intensity or high intensity interval training. Okay. Well, now we know that the way the mitochondria and anaerobic, aerobic, energetic systems in the cells, specifically the heart and the muscles, the way they learn to adapt is through short, intense spurts of activity, and then something develops metabolically, energetically, um, whereby the cell in the mitochondria specifically, and the myocardial cells, and then the muscle cells, the actin and myosin filaments learn to do the repetitive activity with less energy, and they learn to extract oxygen much more efficiently. And there's something that happens neurologically, whereby the inhibition that's placed on these systems is slowly released. That's just what I know from my own studies about sports medicine. Now, there's many more insights, a thousand supplements, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is this: just taking my example of running and sports training into account, if you look at the brain as almost like a muscle, which obviously is nerve tissue, not muscle tissue, of course, I understand that. But the way we are taught, if you compare it to the way we train in sports now, we still teach basically the same way. And because of the students' inability to adapt to the antiquated way we teach, we have basically just ripped the system apart, and replaced it with something that's almost nonsensical to my understanding. Because my understanding, the way the ancients taught mathematics was for a reason. You can use whatever gestalt you want, but at some point you got to get down to the fact that 1 plus 1 equals 2, and you need to understand that. So there's a place for the old rote way, and there's a place for the gestalt fuzzy feel it out way, and they meet somewhere in the center. And there's 100 different styles of learning probably within that, maybe four or two or four, et cetera, major styles of learning. But even these personality types that we talk about, you can't think that these are rigid. What is rigid? The human perception of self isn't a rigid thing. Look into your mind right now. What you likely see is a fluctuating sort of loose, fabrication of shapes. I'm looking in my own mind as I say this. What do I see? Geometric patterns, colors, the information from my five senses, and my feelings that are all a part of what I claim to be me at this moment. Now, to take and organize all of that into one moment and say this is me is just human convention. That's what we say me is. You can unlearn that if you were to go to an Eastern practitioner or yoga or Buddhism. They will say, that's not really you. Let me teach you another version of you. Both versions of you are valid. And actually, one version of you probably helps you not have such a emotionally tumultuous life. It teaches you to manage yourself a little bit better. So I could argue, based on that we should learn different styles, because each person, as they adapt to the nature of the world that they live in, will probably likely need to know different styles of perception, and how perception is laid down, and what their role is in laying down these perceptions and memories, and how they can do it in a fashion that's efficient but less emotionally taxing. you know Sitting in front of something until I got paperwork I gotta do right now, and the other day I just felt like I wasn't ready to do it. And because the job just dumped it on me, he's like, "Oh, by the way, here's this paperwork." I'm like, "Well, thanks for giving me this 2 weeks ago. I could have been working on it already." So I had to go through this process of like not being pissed off about it. Now, after that process is over, I basically decided that approaching the task with a calm mind is much better than doing it in the way that I was taught, which is, I don't give a damn what you feel. You do this shit right now, okay? This is the battle that takes place in every classroom every day. This is the battle that takes place in every human being who isn't a savant. Or, yeah, I'm sorry, you take any savant or prodigy, I don't care who they are. And if you're a savant in music, if I put you in front of a biochemistry textbook, you don't know what the fuck you're looking at. And you likely will not be a prodigy in biochemistry. That word is overused. Some human beings do come with gifts, but most of those human beings, as I've learned in my studies, put a significant amount of time. This is where the 10,000 hour theory comes from, into specifically learning that thing. And then we label them experts, even though we know Bach was in music his whole life and got his 10,000 hours probably pretty early in life. Okay. So now that I've said 31 minutes, I've talked for 31 minutes about learning styles and processes and cognitive processes that take place with learning. I would say that as we teach our children, we have a responsibility and a duty as parents to understand this, because the greater world around us, for one thing, has not gotten to the point where it understands and cares about this as much as it should. And it doesn't mean that you're teaching new age way of learning not to respect authority. Well, I mean, how can I teach you to pedal a bike without teaching you at some point push down on both pedals in alternating fashions? At some point, I have to teach you that you will learn, or I will teach you. You have to push down on each pedal in alternating fashion, or the bike goes nowhere. So, do I really need to say that at some point we need to sit down and memorize the timetables, the ABCs? No, I don't. If I live in a society that has common sense and is sensible, I don't have to say that. But in a society that has gone to an extreme, you have to state obvious things. Okay, if people know these obvious things, because if you don't state them enough, if it's not a part of your culture, then this gets lost, and the nonsensical becomes the sensible. Okay. And I'm very slow to judge because it's another form of taking extreme stances is not the way to wisdom in my experience. And this is an approach you should have towards yourself as well. So me as a child personally, I didn't need a lot of spankings. I didn't need a lot of correction. I was obvious It was obvious to my parents that I had a natural gift for learning things of different sorts, household chores, schoolwork. I didn't like getting my ass whooped, so I generally did what I had to do to avoid it. Now my brother, on the other hand, is very smart, but he was a scrapper. He hated authority more than I do, which is funny saying that our father was a policeman. But at any rate, now as a parent, you have to identify these two types of temperament, these two types of learning style. My brother was very good artist. I was good with concepts and equations and mathematics. Later on, I found out I was good in art too, but not at first because I didn't pursue that the way he did. But the learning style isn't so much to allow the student to get away with stuff, as our society kind of imply. Well, why should I teach that way? I'm not gonna dumb down the classroom for the slowest, et cetera, et cetera. It's simply recognizing the way we as human beings and our cognition and brain works, and trying to figure out if you're left or right brain, et cetera, et cetera. I actually started out in test. I'm gonna tell y'all this. This is very important. If I recall, when I first took a formal paper test that I bought from the store, it told me that I was a left brain thinker. Now, when I take tests after age, let's say my late 20s to 30s, it started telling me that I was a right brain thinker. So you put that in your pipe and contemplate it. How did I switch from a left brain to a right brain thinker? Was I always both, just predominantly one or the other? Right. And I think the repercussions for this is that if you're right brain, I'm going to reinforce what you already have, but also teach you that there's a different way of learning left brain and vice versa. And that to me is more of a balanced, equanimous, sensible way of helping students, our children, ourselves take this massive amount of information dump that's happened in the past, I don't know, 50 years, And how do we categorize it? How do we store it? How do we use it? How do we put it into the bigger picture of human endeavors so that it will benefit us and it not just become, an end into itself? Because that's what'll happen if you don't. We'll just collect nuts like like squirrels, and we don't need nuts anymore, but that's what we do. We just collect nuts. Well, at some point we gotta say what the point is collecting nuts. If now the whole tree's full of nuts and we got nuts for 100 years for all of our grandkids and kids and kids, like, should we move on to something other than nuts? Is it okay to move on? Is it okay to learn about, I don't know, Brazilian nuts instead of peanuts or whatever? I mean, like, yes, technical societies do need people with skill sets, but shouldn't it be about our humanity first? That's all I'm saying. Once I understand what I am as a human being, what that really represents, these processes, these techniques, this wisdom that's passed down generation to generation, it's like not having to tell, I don't have to tell a rose bush, become a rose, okay? But in the sense of being a human being, this is what we do. We tell everyone what to do and how to define themselves. And when we look at the bigger pattern that nature gives us, she doesn't have to do that. So there's some wisdom in that, is what I'm saying. And we slowly maybe should consider teasing out that wisdom and bringing that into our own personal teaching and learning styles and into the classroom. Bring these teaching and learning styles. And scientifically, you can map out what works and what doesn't. Okay, it doesn't even have to be on school time. These experiments can be done on internet with groups of people, because some of the experiments that I know of, for instance, teaching someone a nonsensical language in a sensical language and how to sing a song, the experiments show if you teach someone in a different language a song, they learn it faster than learning a song that is in a nonsensical language. In other words, a language that doesn't even exist, you just made it up. There's some insight there. These insights that we have that go back thousands of years need to be correlated into a modern theory of learning. And probably slowly this is happening because I'm having this conversation, okay? And I went through the Mega Memory course, and it taught me a lot about how my brain puts information together. But it's not wrong if a student learns left brain as opposed to right. Uh, Bastiat may have been a right brain thinker, or maybe not. Maybe he's a left brain thinker. One of the greatest artists of our the last generation. I'm not sure what his thinking style was. Jazz artists like Miles Davis, are they right or left brain? At some point, they have to be both, because when you learn the technical aspects of music, the scales, the harmonies, creating melody de novo in the moment, this is utilizing really the highest level of everything that I'm talking about as an expression of our humanness in this moment, which, in my opinion, is what it's all for anyway. If it's creating, oh, you too, brother. What's up, OV? Namaste, man. Happy Father's Day. I was thinking about you today because I was on Instagram and I was on your page looking at some of your beautiful pictures, man. I'm glad you called me before I was just about to sign out. But you can catch the replay, man. You can catch the replay. I just try. I was just dropping some of my insights about what it means to be a teacher, which is one of the titles that fathers all. I appreciate it, man. I always appreciate you, bro. I always appreciate you. You know, man, my father did not really teach formally. He taught me martial arts formally. He didn't even teach me kata. Now imagine think about what I'm saying. My father, who had black belts in karate, a sash of some sort in kung fu, and was a veteran of the Vietnam War and a Marine and a policeman, probably trained to a high level in firearms. His oldest son, when he taught me martial arts, he didn't think it was extremely important to teach me all these formal katas. And my father, had the mind of an engineer. He was going to seminary to be an engineer. He was a smart man. But I often wonder if he didn't teach me kata because at some point in life, he figured out my son is not going to learn to fight the way I want him to learn to fight by me teaching him this memorized dance. Okay. He taught me things like walking punch. He taught me all the basic blocks and all the basic kicks and stances, right? Karate Kid stance, learn that one. Cat stance, yep. Horse stance, learn all the basic stances. Yes, he was more of a let's play fight. So sparring. He taught me the basics and made sure I knew how to throw a proper front kick. I promise you, if I kick you with a Japanese karate front kick, it will hurt. It will hurt. Now, the wisdom is how do I connect that front kick to you? Because you're doing something you don't want to be kicked, right? We're sparring. How do I close the distance? Art of war is deception. How do I make you think I'm going to punch and I really want to kick, etc., etc.? Maybe the dance. And I did learn some form of kata. When I learned Wing Chun, I did on my own accord learn the first form, which is called the Simlim Tao, which means the little idea, is my understanding. And I do see at some point while learning kata is useful. And it's funny that I didn't learn kata until I've been practicing martial arts my whole life, contemplating and practicing martial arts, getting into all kinds of street fights, people trying to test me, which happens. Hate to say it, but if you're in America, you're a black male, you out there in these streets, somebody's gonna talk shit and test you, especially when you're a mild mannered, soft spoken person like I am. I'm just telling you what I know, man. So my father probably knew that because he forced me to defend myself on at least one occasion I can remember when I didn't really want to. So this is a father learning, watching, surmising my personality type, my physical attributes. You see, that's what he was doing. Whether he knew he was doing it or not is irrelevant. That's the way he was teaching. You know, should he have been more formal? It depends. I told my sister today that the reason I don't like teaching my nephews is because they don't listen. When I teach them some insights I have about spirituality, they generally say to me stuff like, "I know, I know, I know." I mean, a person like me, you only gonna say "I know" to me so many times before I say, "You know what, bro? I spent $1 million for my education. You get your shit however you get it, bro. All right, just get it however. That's look. I come from that school. Okay, if you want to talk shit and you know everything, all right, fine. Because I'll tell you right now, if it's martial arts, I'm gonna tell you what's gonna happen. I'm gonna say, put the fucking gloves on and show me. That's all. That's easy. But I can't do that with life, right? I can't do that with life. So I can't reproduce these things that are gonna happen to you, events. I don't know what they're gonna be. Maybe somebody's gonna burn a cross in your front yard and say, "Hey, nigger," or maybe your wife is gonna be the sweetest woman in the world, and you're gonna be the biggest asshole. I don't know what's gonna happen. So really what we have to offer, yeah, use different techniques. Different technique depending on the thing that philosophy has taught me and science is that we can't even fathom most of these situations. They appear to be similar, but in reality, each one of us is having a unique experience in space and time that is unlike anything that has happened before it. At the same time, it is what's the word? In its totality, a unity. That's the paradox. If you don't recognize the paradox, then according to Buddhism, you suffer. But what I see is become rigid. And Bruce Lee talked about this rigidity. And in the learning styles, cognitive learning styles, I think in the West, we have tended to become too rigid on the way that teaches technological mastery. Okay. Craftsmen mastering a craft. Whereas the royal class and the monks, they were learning something different. And they were learning a different way than the way you teach craftsmen. Okay. And there's insight into that. There's insight into learning what you have and who you are first before I throw you into the fray. How about I just teach you a little bit about what memory is and what I know about it and how we store these, how they're not even actually completely stored in the brain. Thank God, phew, because brain is extremely limited, as far as I can tell. I'm glad there may be something bigger than my physical brain that's storing these memories that I have and these equations and techniques and language and perceptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like I told my friends, I showed them the picture. I said, this guy who went to, let's just say, an elite level school like Cambridge, I can't remember if it was Cambridge or not. Uh, they showed a picture of his brain. He was missing most of the inside of his brain was hollow. He had basically the rind of an orange, the peel, the outside. That's what was left of his brain. And he was able to get a PhD in mathematics. Chop up a rat's brain, and you cannot get it to forget the way it goes through a maze. These are all insights. Nature's giving you little bitty clues. But as I said the other day, nature does not yield her secrets easily. But when you finally see something, you see it. To just go back and ignore it, and act like it didn't happen, this is the source of suffering and ignorance and violence. That is the source of violence against ourselves and others. And so, as human beings, we need to stop doing this. Stop acting like we don't know something. Because fear, right? Fear, aversion, attraction, fear, envy. We know the reasons why we do it. Greed, pride, right? Ignorance, anger. We know the reasons we do it. So, along the road of trying to learn to master self, we need to learn how we learn, the ways we learn. One thing I will say before me and Izzy got off that scope the other day was it is recognized amongst minorities, black inner city kids, that they learn better when they're put into a better environment with food, stable home, no threats of violence around them. Like, do I have to really say that? And why did it take me 30, 40 years as a black man in America before I understood that? Because I always just felt guilty. Like, if I went home and I couldn't learn something fast enough, I'd be like, damn, man. And I was the top student in my school. I was a good student. But my teacher, my black male math teacher, recognized that I wasn't reaching my potential. If he'd have had that insight, would he have approached me differently? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe a hand on the shoulder and be like, it's gonna be okay, Jim. We've all been there. People like me, that's all we need, honestly. I don't need you to stroke me up. I don't give a fuck about none of that bullshit. Just be like, humanity to humanity. Let's connect for a second. Take a deep breath. I'm back in the fray, man. I told you, I come from the warrior cast. That's how we function. Huh? No. No. So this is just insights I have on learning. Being a teacher my whole life and a student my whole life. And for the rest of my life, teacher and student. Thank you. Uh Hopefully someone down the line will take some of this stuff. Yeah, man. It's a very some of these insights really came at the like everybody else. Yeah, it came from pain, suffering, death, dismemberment, divorce, taxes, job loss, job gained. I mean, this is how I learned all this stuff, man. And then in between that, yeah, sitting down and doing rote, memorizing things, playing things over and over again, practicing things over and over again, rereading the same books of 1,000 times that I've read on music or chemistry or medicine or some topic in internal medicine again and again and again to gain insight. And then a little bit more insight is, hmm, why don't I approach it like this? Why don't I just calm the fuck down? Why don't I just learn I over E, intelligence and insight over emotion? You know, why don't I just eat right? Why don't I just sleep at night? Why don't I just this is all part of the learning process, man. And sitting down with students and going through these type of conversations, having these types of conversations, some of the students will get it and some won't. But you know what? That will always be the way it is. In a classroom full of X number of students, there will never be 100% across the board. And that's okay. That's okay. It's not about that. It's just about, you know, before Jesus taught the people in the Bible, what did he do? Y'all hungry? Y'all want some fish? And okay. Y'all ready? Y'all good now, right? Everybody cool? Now y'all ready to learn something? If you think Jesus doesn't have anything to say about learning or by example, you better go read that Bible. Oh, hey man, thanks for stopping by. I'm about to go myself too. Have a good Happy Father's Day too, man. I know you. I'm pretty sure you're a father. I think you are. Yeah, if I recall. I do remember seeing some youngins on your IG. That's the fuzzy just stalk coming up when I look through the IG. I remember seeing you sitting next to with a youngin. But hope you guys I mean, I guess out of this, we should revisit this subject in the future, and maybe after I look up some stuff on learning styles, uh, because I didn't major in education. I hope education teaches this, but my background is in medicine and psychology, so of course we know something about learning styles and cognitive processes. So it all connects. It all goes together. And being in school for like most of your life, you generally tend to learn something about the learning process just from spending your whole life in a classroom. But you could do something wrong your whole life or right your whole life and not know you're doing it wrong or right. And wrong or right tend to be degrees. They are polar degrees of each other. We learned this from uh, philosophy, metaphysics. The right and wrong are just relative to each other. So we're trying to connect. We're trying to bring the needle more into the center. With that, I'll say thanks for hanging with me. Happy Father's Day to all you fathers. Keep doing what you do, because without you and the mothers, of course, y'all got y'all day too. Don't worry, can't never forget y'all. We're often forgot for different reasons. I understand. But that being said, um, we're all in this thing together, man. We're all different rays from the same sun. So let's try to learn something about sun. You know, that's all. Till next time. Peace out.